Hi everyone, this week we are going to discuss causal inference in our program theory. Your assigned reading for this week is Fennell and Rogers, chapter 15. So first off, what is causal inference? Causal inference is the ability to explain the causal links between the intervention or program and the outcomes. And to evaluate this in your program, you have to have a balance between using scientific approaches and pragmatism. So we want to do the best we can to control our measurement, and at the same time, we have to do what's feasible for the program. There are three basic approaches to addressing causal inference. They are congruence, counterfactual comparison, and critical review. So congruence is the one that the book places the most emphasis on. It gives you the most amount of ways to address it or to evaluate for congruence, and it's a lot of the bulk of the chapter focuses on this area. So congruence, one of the ways is to evaluate compare the immediate and final outcomes. So if you're doing interim outcome measurement, you would compare to see that they're moving in the same direction and that they make sense, that you can get from one outcome to the next from from somewhere in the middle toward the end, that it all makes sense. They also discuss disaggregating results of complicated interventions. So some of your programs have a lot of moving parts, right? So we want to sometimes break it apart and look at whether the individual parts are happening as they should, whether the outcomes are coming along as they should, and whether they all fit together in a logical sense. We may want to statistically control for extraneous variables. For example, certain factors about participants we might want to control for, other contextual factors that might come up. There are a number of ways that statistics can be used if you have a large enough sample to do that meaningfully. Modus operandi, I think, is maybe not quite as clear as some of the other approaches to identifying congruence, but really think of it as consistency with conceptual frameworks that might be underlying your program theory. You can also compare the timing of outcomes with the program theory. For instance, is the timing of when the outcomes occur reasonable considering when the program theory was implemented? We can look at dose response patterns, meaning if people get a larger dose of your program, so to speak, attend more sessions or receive more information materials, do they have a better outcome or a stronger response? You can compare predictions based on statistical models or expert opinion to the actual results, see how close or different they are. Asking participants or other key informants is always a good way to assess congruence, and actually that applies to the other approaches for causal inference as well. And finally, cross-case comparison. So are things unfolding the same way across cases? So counterfactual comparison is really it's an approach to see what would have happened without the intervention or the program. So the first would be to use a control or comparison group. So say you're only able to deliver your program to a certain percentage of your target population, you could compare the outcomes for your target group who received the intervention to those who did not. And that would be more actually like a clinical trial, like either a randomized or non-randomized control trial where you have a control group. You can also look at the trajectories of an outcome before and after the intervention is implemented or before and after your program is implemented. So you might look at how are your outcomes going, what's the trajectory before you start it, and then how does it shift? How does the direction shift or the pace of change happen? Thought experiments, this is kind of an interesting approach, but it's really just thinking about what are other plausible scenarios for how your outcomes were achieved. And again, asking the participants or other key informants what they think happened or what they think would have happened without the intervention. The third approach to causal inference is critical review. And here we have a couple other approaches. One of them is identifying alternate explanations for the outcomes being achieved. Is that something else happened that could have caused the change besides your program? Is there anything else? Identifying and explaining exceptions. So if there are some people who really benefited from the program, but maybe some other small group that did not, what can we learn from them? How can we explain why it didn't work as well with them? Is there another piece of the program theory that we need to consider to be able to meet the needs of everybody we're targeting? Again, this is a repeat from the first one, but it's the same approach can be used for critical review to compare the predictions to the actual results. Once again, asking participants or other key informants can be really helpful in doing a critical review, and also making comparisons across cases. So, it's, again, seeing if the program theory is working the same way in all cases where it's being applied, whether that's on an individual basis or on a site basis, or sometimes we do a program multiple times. We could compare across delivery sessions. So depending on the structure of your program, we can use the case definition would be different, but we could compare them and see if it's always working the same way.